started making and wearing
I can't really say that.
Has it changed
at least a
me?
month before the march, our city of Paris
Maybe more
election
artistic.
changed me, and we started wearing them every day, and really realized a difference in the way I was.
I mean, okay, well, I can't really say that it's changed me much. It's changed the way that, how can I say it? I've always voted and I've always appreciated the right to vote, especially as a woman and a woman of color. And I think it's forced me to sort of implement that more towards people who have this mixed and confused idea about how the Electoral College works, because a lot of people really don't know. But I think it's changed my... Damn, I mean, like, you know what it really did? I realized that this country is more sexist than racist, and it's a hell of a racist country. So that says quite a lot. And I'm scared. I don't think I've ever been any more afraid of any president-elect coming into office as I am for Trump after the inauguration.
Heartbreaking and infuriating. And I think for me personally, never mind the issues on a global scale that are coming up, but personally, I find myself sort of looking around at people and wondering who was on what side of things, and I never really looked at humanity as like sides before, but it feels that way now. It feels a little different, and it makes me want to be very vocal about why I think my side is the right one and the one that supports equality and love, and so it's ignited a fire in me to want to stand up for things and educate people and sort of enlighten them, and then it goes back to, well, why do I think I'm, this person who is in a position to do that? But at the end of the day, I feel like it's very clear that one side is the bad guys versus the good guys. That's how it feels.
It's been weird because it's made me more proud of being an American than I think I've ever been. And in a way I hadn't expected. So my friend in Germany, after the election, sent me a note that I could come and live with her because she said I wasn't really that much of an American after all. And she meant it as a compliment that I wasn't like the people who voted for Trump. But I took it a different way. I thought it was insulting because a lot of people didn't vote for Trump. In fact, most people didn't vote for Trump. And I don't think he defines what we are as Americans. And the elections made me want to be much more out about being an American, the kind of American that I think most of us are. So I guess that's it.
Would you say you're a proud American?
Weirdly, yeah. And I don't think had you asked me that ever before, I would have said yeah. But I am. I'm proud of being a resistant.
I'm from Ohio, and I was home actually voting. I stayed at my parents' house and went home and just voted in Ohio because I was a little worried. And I'm registered to vote there, and I went, and we stayed up waiting for this result, and it happened, and we kind of were laughing at first, and then we're terrified. And I think that that's kind of what the general feeling is. And I live in this bubble in New York where we're all kind of taking for granted that the rest of the world is as liberal as we are and as progressive as we are, and I'm realizing that's not the case. So I'm actually really excited because I'm taking a show I wrote that deals with coming out of the closet to a small college in Ohio to produce it and work on it there. And I'm really excited because it's this small rural conservative town that has a university in it, and we're gonna explore this gay love story in that setting, and that's gonna be really cool to share that with the town.
I got light in my life and I'm lit. I'm no longer a slave to the dark in my mind. No, I'm finally done fighting within. Yeah. And if you could do good, brother, share that light with me. 'Cause if it's dark a minute more, I'm afraid I'll never see. And if it's dark a minute more, I'm afraid I might lose me. Brother, I love
don't know. It's hard to talk about with family too, because even though I feel like I share a lot of the same political views as my family and maybe who we voted for in this election, I think there's still a divide as to how do we respond to what we're doing, right? So I think a lot of what I'm hearing back is, well, we just have to wait and see what happens. And that kind of really upsets me, because I think I realized, my voice doesn't end like when I voted, and I'm more angry by that response than I am like afraid of what's going to happen to our country. So there's more like anger motivating action than it is kind of like
making and wearing pussy hats. At least a month before the march, I was pretty obsessed. I made at least 15 of them, and I started wearing them every day because it was cold out, and really realized a difference in the way I was treated when I had the pussy hat on as opposed to when I didn't. It seemed to be a don't waste my time if you're not, just kind of don't waste my time, I guess. I'm an extrovert, I'm fairly open, I've worked in the service industry most of my life, and I feel like people have always felt very comfortable around me, and so they feel free to strike up a conversation with me in the grocery store or wherever, whether I know them or not, especially men, especially older men. And this seems to have put a stop to it. It's not a complete stop, but it seems to just kind of say, I'm serious in a way that is somewhat ridiculous. It's somewhat like, there's a crazy lady with a pink hat on with ears, I think I'll just let her be. When you wear it in kind of sanctuaries of liberal politics, you feel, you might get an arm raise in the grocery store, or you might just get a nod from another woman. And at the same time, I've worn it in some rural areas where I feel like it's very conservative, possibly Fox News is playing. That happened just the other day, and I felt like it was confrontational. And I wasn't sure if it was confrontational in a helpful way, and I think I'll still wear it, as long as it's cold at least. And I think we have to really be careful with how we fight what is happening. And we don't want to necessarily be confrontational, we want to build bridges. And we know that there's a lot of us out there, so we can do that.
It's changed me in terms of, I think before the election I was feeling much more powerful as a woman, whereas now it's kind of like a slap in the face. It's kind of like, even if I'm gonna try as hard as I can and be the most educated, most qualified, the best person for the job, I'm not gonna get it, because a loud man who's gonna talk over everyone is gonna get it. It's sad. It's making me like revalue the men in my life, and it just sucks. It's just like a loss of trust, a loss of respect. I feel like I've been fighting, at least for the last few years I've been in college and then living by myself, to really find power in myself as a woman. And I think everyone was really excited to have a woman in power, and to have, even if people hate her, or even if people think she's like the worst person in the world and she needs to be in jail, like at least she was qualified, and at least she was smart and strong. It took her a lot to get to that place. But that just didn't matter in the end. And that sucks. Also, I'm not on birth control. I don't really have a health insurance plan. So what if I'm in a world where I do get pregnant and I can't get an abortion? That is really scary. And I don't know, it's just like, it's just disappointing. Also, it's disappointing to think of friends and people who are immigrants, and I'm an immigrant, but I mean, I'm a young white girl, so I'm probably not going to be targeted. But people who are being isolated just because of who they are, what they look like. That's the same thing back home with Brexit, with Theresa May. Just feels like all of these, like both countries I've lived in and called home, and all of these two major powers are just promoting this racist bigot, like this horrible, 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 horrible attitude towards humanity. And it's crazy to think that it's such a huge scale now. I read this thing.
How did the election change me? The election changed me. Just instantly, my mood changed. I think there were so many people, and I was one of them. The hopeful, optimistic. A woman is about to be president, and things looking progressive, and that sort of disappeared with the blink of an eye. I've been somewhat depressed since. For many reasons, primarily the dismantling of the Affordable Health Care Act affects my family directly. It affects me, my friends, pretty much everyone I know, and I don't think a lot of people really thought that this was going to happen, and what the repercussions are. I'm 53 years old. As I get older, I know more and more things are going to go wrong with me. Any one of those things can be considered a pre-existing condition, and therefore my access to insurance, the premiums can skyrocket, or I can just be denied coverage, which is frightening. Bankruptcy is now, back on the table for everybody, except for the rich insurance executives, and I'm angry about that, and I've got to figure out how to clearly channel that anger to affect change for all, not just for myself. I think the idea is that we all do better when we're healthy, when we're not subject to disease. Without healthcare insurance, folks tend to get sick, they don't go to the doctor, and they spread whatever they may have, potentially. And those are things that I feel the Republican administration has not even considered or cares about. But Republicans will get sick too. And it remains to be seen what happens when an epidemic breaks out, which inevitably it will. We had Zika this past summer. The AIDS virus is all abound. Diabetes is rampant in our country, and diabetes doesn't care if you're black, white, rich, poor. Everybody's got it, and that's a pre-existing condition. And who's going to pay for your test strips and insulin? Nobody's thinking about these things. We all just wanted some change, and we couldn't trust this woman. But look what's happened to us. Now nobody gets any care.
Wow, the election, huh? A turbulent time in American history. So I'd say the biggest change for me with the switch in administration has been healthcare. I have been living with Crohn's disease for the last 25 years of my life, and finally I'm at a time when I'm on medication that is helping me, that is actually stopping my symptoms and allows me to have a normal quality of life. And if I'm not able to have my medicine because my premium changes and the medicine gets too expensive, or I'm not able to see the doctors and specialists that I need, then I'm really going to be in a bad situation. And I think that a lot of people feel the same way. And whether people feel that way or not, it could be the truth. So I'm very, very worried about what's going to happen with healthcare in America with this new administration that we're living in. And hopefully things will work out for the best. But right now, I'm scared.
Do you feel like you could die?
I feel like the quality of my life could drastically change. With my disease, if I'm not on medicine, it's hard for me to live. It's hard for me to work. It's hard for me to get out of bed in the morning. So I'm just worried.
It's been an incredibly tumultuous time. It's been full of sorrow, and by the same token, it's made me realize how much privilege I have, how lucky I am, because I happen to be born in Puerto Rico, which is a territory of the United States, and then I grew up in Mexico. I lived in Mexico until I was 19, so I lived there for 18 years. And every person that he's talking about deporting, all the Mexican rapists, all the drug dealers, like the people that I work with in the kitchen of the restaurant that I work in, when he talks about them, he's talking about me and my family. And it's also been very, very tough because without really meaning to, I've kind of felt this huge anger. I mean, I got into a fight with my boyfriend about him not thinking that Trump would actually win the nomination, let alone the election. And then when he won, he was like, well, it's not going to be that bad. And I'm like, but you don't know that. You know, I was on the train and I had somebody tell me to suck their dick, and I was followed. And this is the start of everything. I feel very terrified. I feel unsettled. And I know that New York is supposed to be a sanctuary city. And I really hope that it is, and I really hope that all New Yorkers come together, no matter what they look like, no matter what their creed is. It's tough. My dad was a Republican. He didn't necessarily support Trump, but he doesn't think that he's a good guy, and the normalizing of all of this behavior freaks me out. But it's been great to know that I have friends that are active, not reactive or passive, that are actually doing something about it. We're calling, we're emailing, we're doing everything that we can. I'm going to the march next week in DC. I feel hopeful. I'm going to try to hold on to that as much as I can, even though it's very hard to wake up to incredibly ugly news every day.
The election certainly changed me. I went from being kind of, your run-of-the-mill, hanging out, artist, musician, small business owner, and it turned me into a superhero for human rights. It was really interesting when Donald Trump said, "Grab by the pussy, you can do anything," something literally inside of me snapped. And I felt so disempowered and impotent, and I felt so very small. And I saw this hatred and dissonance and isolation, and I wanted to fight it. And of course my first impulse is to say, well, I'm going to fight it with that same thing. But what I realized is that you can't fight hate with hate. If you want to eradicate hate, you can't do it by being hateful or having hate. You have to do it with its antithesis, which is love and inclusion. And so I thought, what's the one thing that we all have been through? The one thing that unites us all is that we're created in a uterus, every single one of us. It doesn't matter what race or religion, what creed, sexual orientation, just doesn't matter. We were all created in a uterus. We all have something to do with the vagina. And so it started off actually as this superhero inside of me kind of came out, and I met her around the time that Trump said, you can grab by the pussy. And so I started as the pussy that grabs back. So anytime someone tried to come up and like touch me, I'd be like, ah, rah, rah. And it was funny and it was fun, but it really started to evolve into a way for me to have conversations and to be effective at including people. And by taking those people that maybe feel a little small or impotent to affect change and to do it on a very individual level. And I feel like individuals, when you get enough of them, something turns on and change really starts to happen, or even just having a conversation a lot of times they've changed my outlook and my perspective. And so I hope that it changes others to be more inclusive, or to think about ways that they can eradicate the hate that they don't want to see, not by hating that thing, but rather by loving it anyway.
And what's your superhero name?
My superhero's name is the Vagilante, so the Vigilante, but just big vagina style.
Oh gosh. So it changed me a lot. I don't know. It was so scary. Everything leading up to it was so scary, and the whole grab the pussy thing was so incredibly triggering and awful. I'm a rape survivor, and before that huge admission of sexual assault by our now president, it hurts to say that. Before that happened, it's not like it was a huge secret. I had done a lot of work in therapy around it, but some people knew, some people didn't. I would still sort of, maybe if I was telling someone, I'd be sort of quiet about it or afraid around it. And when that happened, there was no more space inside myself to be quiet about that. It was like all the fear, anything that was left after all the years of therapy just sort of got like pushed out. Like I had to speak, and I stepped into myself in that way, and I publicly shared my story on Facebook, and that was really empowering and very scary. I felt very just wrung out, like I wanted to crawl into a hole, but it was ultimately very empowering because I just had to be my full self. Like my experience, my life, all of it, there's no room for anything less than my full self, because we have to fight so hard. And so that happened, and that was good. Like I walk around different now. So that is good. So I guess I'm grateful for this monster bringing all that to light. And then after the election, I was I was just so grief-stricken and scared, all the hate crimes, everything, that I felt like I needed to dream smaller, which was sad, but it just felt like, well, that's what we do now. We dream smaller. But just sort of taking everything a day at a time and talking to people, I realized that there's no room to dream smaller either, and that the only way to combat what's happening right now is to be the fullest expression of myself at any time, and to be as fearless as possible. Somebody once said, courage is just being afraid and doing it anyway. So I'm giving myself permission to still be scared, but I'm not going to stop fighting.
My faith in the rational thought of the American people has been seriously shaken. I can't believe that in the 21st century that women have to refight again for basic equality. One of the things that came out for me, the whole nasty woman language, really affected me. I was somebody who spent my whole life in male-dominated fields, and if I ever asserted myself or spoke up for myself or asked for equal pay, I was considered nasty. I was considered a bitch. I was considered overly aggressive. So that whole piece to the election puzzle really resonated for me, to a point where I even got a tattoo with something about it. One of the things that really, really frightens me about this situation, this election, this inauguration, is what's going to happen to the developmentally disabled and the elderly. These are people who are already underserved in the current situation and are only going to lose more. And this is something that's going to affect us all. I mean, maybe we don't all have somebody in our life who's developmentally disabled, but we are all going to get older in this country. And if we don't have services, so many of us are already only a paycheck away from homelessness. And you see more and more elderly people sleeping on the streets and sleeping on the subway. And that's not how anybody should end their life. People should be able to age gracefully like they do in other countries. And this country is already made it a very uncomfortable place for our elderly, people who have served us in this country, people who have taken care of other people, worked hard all their lives. They shouldn't have to end their life in a subway station eating out of a subway garbage can.
So do you want to show us your tattoo?
Sure, you got it.
Proud to be a
Nasty woman.
IDF, Comic Book Legal Defense Fund. It's really it's one of the only things on my shelf that's not comics. It's just profiles of comics creators, important women in comics, editors, publishers, critics. Some of these people have had an incredibly important effect on the industry. Kate Lath is a pretty excellent example. She's really super young compared to a lot of other people profiled in here. But she created a group called the Valkyries that is specifically for women involved in comic book stores, either owners, workers, volunteers, to network together online. And that has actually been pretty powerful for this industry.
So is having this book part of making your business more political?
Well, the truth is I'd ordered it before. I ordered it before the election. I ordered 2 copies before the election. But I'm pretty sure my plan was to call that an experiment. I'm pretty confident I wouldn't have reordered. It is now like an absolute, we must have this in the store at all times post the election. Say whatever that, I'm not even 100% sure what that means, but that's
And you have an
something I think is important.
anti-establishment shelf?
Yeah, there's a whole shelf that this now sits on that's mostly comics, either comics promoting feminism. One section of it is kind of more fantasy stuff, but fantasy stuff presenting some kind of real political ideas embedded in there.
And this is all because of the election?
Yeah, definitely wouldn't have created that shelf without the election. It was like the week, either the night of the election or a week after, I don't even remember. I was just so angry, and all of a sudden I thought, there's something I can do. There's, goddamn it, one thing I can do. I can put all of these books that make women look strong and independent people, all of these books that present how science is important, all of these books that present the idea of like individual people's rights is important, put them on one shelf and make it clear why I put them on.
All the people that were there, men and women, like all types of people from all different backgrounds, like old people and young people and queer people and straight people and all these different people like dressed in great costumes with amazing signs, just saying the same things that I've been feeling and thinking, and knowing that we're all in it together. And for the first time, I feel so excited by the possibilities of people taking back the power. And even though I'm still disappointed that Hillary didn't win, I don't think I would have realized how empowered we are, like how ready this population is, the East Coast, the West Coast, liberals, people who know what's right, like parents and like young people, just saying like, okay, we know what's right and we know what's wrong, and we're resisting, and we're going to do everything in our power to make sure that we can turn this around. And I feel so much optimism that we are going to be able to do it, and as a society really facilitate like a real democracy, rather than letting the people who are in power just stay in power and do whatever the hell they want.
The election changed me in 2 really interesting ways to me, ways that I didn't expect at all. First off, I'm much more vocal now than I was before. I've always been an activist. I've always stood up for the people who I feel really needed standing up for. When I was in 6th grade, I stood up to my dad, who was beating my brother, and I said, "You will never do that again." And I was only in 6th grade. I was a child. My father was enormous, and yet something compelled me to stand there in front of my brother and say, "This will never ever happen again." So I've always been someone who would stand up for those who couldn't do it for themselves. But something happened in November. Something shifted in me, and I don't know if it's Trump or menopause, but somehow I now just don't give a shit anymore. I never used to swear in public. I certainly never put my vulnerability and my guts out in the way that I am now. And I've actually started something, a project called One at One, that I'm really, really excited about. That is to keep people engaged in the struggle, to keep activists from complacency, to keep all of us progressing towards a goal. And that's the second thing that's changed for me. I think that before, when I was doing any kind of activism, I would always do it in a general sense. I would always say, we need to have equality, or we need to fight AIDS in the age of Reagan. And now I think that my activism is much more pointed. I have a goal in mind, which I never did before. It's one thing to run a marathon in circles. It's another to know that there's a finish line. And the more you can visualize that finish line, the more you can see the world that you're trying to create, the more easy it is, I think, to create it. And that's what's changed for me. I have a level of hope, even in this time of despair, that I never did before. Because I know it's not just me. I know that there are not even thousands, not even hundreds of thousands, there are millions of people who feel like I do, that the world over the past 8 years before this election was slowly moving in the direction that we wanted, with more and more female consciousness, with more and more female power, representation, choice. The world was shifting and changing. Obviously, this is a backlash against that. So to have all these voices and all this feeling building up now, underneath a brand new repressive regime, building up stronger and stronger, it's bound to explode. But we don't want it just to explode willy-nilly. I don't believe in anarchy. To have that goal, to have a place that we're shooting for, is what we need to actually change the world.